Hello, horror listeners. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for the channel. Also, make sure to tell us in the comments how you like the story and from where you are watching or listening. If you want to hear any specific story, feel free to request it. Now let's begin the story. I wasn't supposed to be in Westridge that night. If my schedule had gone the way I planned, I would have been back in Sacramento before midnight, maybe asleep on my own mattress with the hum of my box fan filling the silence. But plans, I've learned, rarely stick when you're working odd jobs for temp agencies. For the past year, I'd been bouncing around rural towns across Northern California, loading docks, warehouses, roadside construction crews, whatever paid just enough to keep gas in my car and a roof, temporary as it might be, over my head. I told myself it was just until I saved enough to land something stable, maybe back in Fresno where my sister lived. But deep down I knew I was running. From what exactly, I wasn't ready to admit. That last week of September 2022, I'd picked up a night shift in a packing plant on the outskirts of a farming town called Dry Creek. 12 hours of hauling pallets under fluorescent lights that seemed to burn straight through your skull. By the time my shift ended at 11:45 p.m., my body felt hollow, like every muscle had been wrung dry. I should have driven home. It was only 2 hours, but the truth was, I was nodding off before I even pulled out of the lot. My eyes burned, my hands trembled on the wheel, and I kept catching myself veering too close to the gravel shoulder. That was when I knew, if I pushed it, I'd end up in a ditch or worse. So I did what any half-conscious, desperate person would do. I searched Google Maps for the nearest motel. Only one popped up within 20 miles, the Pine Hollow Motel. The name had a strange ring to it, cozy but hollow. No reviews, no website, no photos, just a phone number and a red pin on the map, right off a stretch of Route 47. At 12:25 a.m., I dialed. A man answered on the second ring. His voice was low, rough, maybe late 60s. "You need a room?" "Yeah," I said, "just for tonight." Pause, then, "We've got one open. Number 6, cash or card, doesn't matter. Just show up." No mention of check-in paperwork. No rate. Too tired to care, I muttered a thank you and hung up. By 12:50, I was easing my car down a gravel road that disappeared into dense pine woods. The air cooled the deeper I drove, heavy with the smell of sap and wet dirt. My headlights bounced over trunks so tall they looked like walls closing in. Then the motel appeared. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the late 70s. A single row of 8 rooms shaped in an L, beige siding bleached by decades of sun, half the numbers missing from the doors. A dim neon sign flickered Pine Hollow in green and yellow above a squat wooden office shack. The parking lot was empty. Not a single car but mine. I hesitated, engine idling. The place looked abandoned. That was when the office door opened. A man stepped out, tall and thin, with long gray hair tied in a ponytail. He wore a checkered flannel despite the lingering heat. His face was carved with lines like someone who had lived outside most of his life. "You the one who called?" he asked, voice the same low rasp from the phone. "Yeah," I said, forcing a tired smile. "Just need a room." Short night. He studied me for a beat too long, then nodded toward the office. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old paper. He pulled out a card reader the size of a brick, the kind you had to plug into a phone jack. "No ID check?" I asked, half joking as I handed him my debit card. "Don't need all that," he muttered. The machine beeped once, and he slid a brass key across the desk, heavy on a leather tag. "Number 6, extra towels in the closet. Don't wander the grounds too much. Woods out here are thick." It didn't sound like advice. It sounded like instruction. Room 6 was at the far end. The light above the door was out, so I used my phone flashlight to line up the key. Inside, the room smelled faintly of mildew and something sweet I couldn't place. The carpet was worn thin. The quilt on the bed was stiff, patterned with faded roses. I didn't care. My body craved sleep. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., collapsed on the bed fully clothed, and drifted off before my head hit the pillow. I must have been asleep for barely an hour when something woke me. A knock. 2 soft taps against the door. I sat up, pulse hammering. Another knock. Louder this time. I grabbed my phone. 2:13 a.m. "Hello?" I croaked. No answer. I slid off the bed and crept toward the window. pulled back the curtain an inch. The lot was empty, but then I saw movement, low to the ground near the office porch. Something crawling, too fast to make out before the shadows swallowed it. My throat went dry. I didn't sleep again. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the rusted lamp from the nightstand like a weapon, staring at the door. Just before dawn, another sound, a door creaking open, then slow footsteps, bare feet slapping lightly against concrete. I cracked my own door open and peeked outside. A woman was walking across the lot, barefoot, wearing a long white nightgown that dragged in the dirt. Her face blank, eyes glassy, moving like she was half asleep, or half dead. "Ma'am?" I whispered. She didn't respond. She walked straight past my door and into the trees. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to help her, but my body wouldn't move. Finally, I bolted to the office. The door was locked. I banged on it until my fists hurt. No answer. I pulled out my phone. No signal. When I turned back toward the lot, I saw him, the man who'd given me the key. He was standing at the edge of the woods, barefoot, watching me. I shouted, "That woman! She went into the forest. From room 3, I think. Do you know her?" He didn't answer. His lips curled into the faintest smile. Then he turned and walked back into the office. That was it. I grabbed my bag, sprinted to my car, and tore out of that lot so fast gravel sprayed behind me. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station in Red Bluff with enough service to search Pine Hollow Motel. What I found still knots my stomach. An old article from 2008. The motel had been shut down after multiple reports of guests vanishing. Locals claimed they heard screams from the woods at night. Authorities discovered a shallow grave near the property, an unidentified woman's body half buried behind room 3. The place reopened in 2021 under new management. No records listed who the owner was, and now I can't stop thinking about that woman in the nightgown, or the way the man smiled when I asked about her. Why reopen a place with that history unless that was the point? Story 2. I didn't move to Pine Hollow because I wanted to. Truth is, if things had gone the way I'd planned, I would have never even heard of the place. It wasn't the kind of town you arrived at. It was the kind of town you accidentally passed through on the way to somewhere better. A single blinking stoplight, a diner that closed at 7 p.m., a gas station with a single pump that still asked you to see cashier inside. But when I got laid off from the warehouse job I'd held for almost 6 years, my options shrank fast. Rent in the city had gone up again, my savings barely covered 2 months, and when I started missing minimum payments on my credit card, I knew I couldn't keep up. I had an uncle, Rick, who'd moved out to Pine Hollow decades ago. We'd never been close, but when I called asking if he knew anywhere cheap to stay, he told me about a basement apartment beneath an old insurance office on Main Street. "It ain't much," he said over the phone, his voice grainy like he was talking through a sock. "But it's cheap. $400 a month? Cash. Landlord doesn't ask questions." That was enough. The place was dark, damp, and smelled faintly of mildew. The window was so small it was more of a vent, but it was $400 and I could walk to everything Pine Hollow had to offer in 10 minutes. So I swallowed my pride, moved in with 2 duffel bags, and told myself it was temporary. Just a pit stop until I could find something better. Weeks slipped by. My routine was empty. Wake up late, scroll through job boards, send out applications that went unanswered. By the 3rd week, my phone barely buzzed anymore. I spent evenings sitting on the sagging mattress, watching muted TV through static. One cold Thursday in early March, I walked past the Pine Hollow Motel. It sat on the edge of town, a single row of 15 rooms facing the cracked parking lot, the kind of place truckers and drifters stopped at when they couldn't make it to the city. A hand-painted sign in the front window said, "Help wanted. Night desk." Something about it made me stop. Inside, the office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old carpet cleaner. Behind the desk was the owner, a wiry man in his 50s with sunken cheeks and restless hands. His name was Howard Clay, but he told me to just call him Howie. "You looking for work?" he asked, eyeing me up like I might bolt. "Yeah," I said. "Night shift's fine." "You ever worked motel front desk before?" "No." He scratched his jaw. "Don't matter. Nobody else is asking. Job simple. Stay awake, keep the books, hand out keys. Don't let anyone trash the place. We don't get many locals, mostly highway folks. And just like that, I was hired. No paperwork, no ID check. Just a set of keys, a logbook, and a mumbled, "Start Friday, 10 to 6. You'll figure it out." My first night started quietly. Cold wind rattled the aluminum siding, but the parking lot was calm. A few out-of-towners checked in before midnight. A trucker with a cough, a young couple who avoided eye contact, a traveling salesman who smelled like whiskey. Then just before 11, a woman walked in. She looked mid-40s, pale and exhausted, with a green winter coat zipped to her chin. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, and she kept glancing over her shoulder toward the highway. "You need a room?" I asked. "Yes, please." Just for one night, her words came too fast, like she wanted to finish before I could ask questions. "Cash okay?" "Sure." I slid the key for room 14 across the counter. She grabbed it like it was a lifeline. At the door, she paused, scanning the dark parking lot before unlocking her room. She yanked the curtain shut the second she was inside. I told myself not to overthink it. People came through motels for all kinds of reasons. You learn fast not to pry, but something about her stuck with me. Around 1:15 a.m., the office doorbell chimed. I hadn't heard a car pull up. A man stood in the doorway, late 30s maybe, flannel shirt, jeans, hair messy like he'd run his hands through it too many times. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, darting everywhere but my face. "You looking for a room?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yeah, maybe. It's $50. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, his eyes flicked over my shoulder to the key rack, then back to the glass front of the office. He muttered something under his breath I couldn't catch. Then flatly, "Never mind." He turned and walked out. I expected to hear a car door, an engine, something, but there was nothing. When I stepped outside, the lot was empty. He was gone. A chill crawled up my neck. At 1:45, the desk phone rang. The shrill sound made me jump. "Front desk," I answered. A woman's whisper crackled through the line. "There's a man outside my room." My chest tightened. "Which room?" 14. I grabbed the flashlight and hurried out. Her curtain was cracked. A pale face peeked through. The door opened just enough for her to stand there, clutching her phone. "Did you see him?" she asked, voice shaking. "No, not now." "Did he say anything?" She shook her head. "He just stood there. Wouldn't leave. Just stared," I swallowed. "Do you know him?" "No." Too fast. "What did he look like?" She described him exactly, the man from the office. "Do you want me to call the sheriff?" "No, no police. Please, I'll leave early. Just, if you see him again." She trailed off, closed the door, and locked it before I could answer. Something about it gnawed at me. Back in the office, I glanced at the key rack. All accounted for, except one. Room 7's key was missing. It was marked vacant in the logbook. My stomach dropped. At 2:20, a crash split the silence. A muffled scream followed. I bolted outside, gripping the wooden bat Howie kept behind the counter. Room 14's door was wide open. The woman was backed into the corner, shaking, hands raised. Between her and the door stood the man in flannel. His voice was low, words sharp but too quiet to catch. "Hey!" I shouted. He spun around, eyes bloodshot, lips curled. For a second, I thought he'd come at me. Instead, he bolted, charging past me, across the lot, into the black trees beyond the highway. I rushed inside. The woman was trembling, tears streaming down her face, a split lip, bruises forming on her wrist. "You okay?" I asked, breathless. She nodded weakly. "I'm calling the sheriff." This time, she didn't argue. Deputies arrived 10 minutes later. Flashlights cut through the dark, radios crackling. She finally admitted the truth. The man was her ex-husband. His name was Evan Ward. She'd filed a restraining order in Ohio months back after he'd snapped. Broken glass, slammed doors, bruises. He'd tracked her before. She thought she'd lost him. She was driving to her sister's place in Missouri. Pine Hollow was just supposed to be a pit stop. He must have stolen a spare key, she said, voice hoarse. Waited until he knew I was alone. The deputies searched the tree line. Nothing. Evan was gone. I worked at the Pine Hollow Motel for 4 more months. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I wasn't scared off. Maybe I just didn't have better options. But every night after that was different. Every shadow made me tense. Every guest who avoided eye contact put me on edge. I checked the key rack a dozen times a shift. Eventually, I landed a tech job in the city. Packed my bags, left Pine Hollow behind. Sometimes Howie still mails me a Christmas card. Always the same note, hope it's quieter where you are. But I still think about that night, about how close it came, about the sound of her scream, about the way he looked at me before he ran. And I still don't know why he ran. Maybe he realized a line had been crossed, or maybe deep down, he just enjoyed the chase. Story 3, I was 26 the summer I moved out to Willow Creek, a faded little town tucked along Route 41 in Northern California. If you've ever driven that stretch, you probably wouldn't even remember it. A couple of gas stations, a liquor store, a diner with a broken neon sign that just reads, "Die." The kind of place you blink through on your way to somewhere better. But for me, it became the only option. The year leading up to it had been brutal. I'd lost my copy editing job at a mid-sized publishing house in Sacramento after budget cuts. Then 3 months later, the relationship I'd been in since college collapsed under the weight of arguments about money, trust, and the fact that neither of us could picture a future together anymore. By spring, my savings were nearly gone, my lease was up, and I was staring down the reality of moving back into my parents' house in Reno. And God, I just couldn't do it. Don't get me wrong. My parents are good people. My mom especially wanted nothing more than to have me home. But I needed space. I needed to prove to myself that I could keep my head above water, even if I was just barely treading. That's when I saw the ad. I hadn't even realized I still had an old Craigslist search saved for night jobs. But there it was. Night clerk needed, Redwood Motel. Reliable, independent, no experience required. Cash pay. Apply in person, the Redwood Motel. I didn't even know the place existed. The next morning, I followed my GPS down Route 41 until it spit me out onto a quiet side road lined with tall redwood trees. That's the thing. Willow Creek itself looks like a ghost town, but the trees around it are these massive sentinels, towering higher than anything man-made. When the wind moves through them, it sounds like the ocean. And there, crouched just beyond the tree line, sat the motel. 10 rooms, 1 story, painted a pale green that had faded into something closer to mold. A chipped sign out front read, Redwood Motel, in big block letters, with half the bulbs burned out. Even in the daylight, the vacancy sign buzzed a weak red. The office sat at the far left, attached to room 1. The blinds were drawn, but a hand-lettered note taped to the door read, Clerk, knock, so I knocked. The door creaked open a few inches, and a man's voice, gravelly but chipper, called, You the one for the ad? Yes, sir, I said. Name's Rachel. Rachel Hayes. The door opened the rest of the way, and I got my first look at him. Earl wasn't his name this time. This man introduced himself as Harlan. He was in his 60s, wide-shouldered, but starting to slump. He wore a short-sleeve button-up that was stained darker under the pits, and his hair, what was left of it, stuck to his forehead in greasy tufts. His smile stayed on too long, a beat past comfortable. Well, Rachel, he said, you might just be what I'm looking for. The office was cramped, an old desk stacked with faded ledgers, a wall of keys hanging behind glass, a coffee maker that looked older than me, and a small TV bolted to the corner, running black and white security feeds. This is it, Harlan said, sweeping a hand around like it was a showroom. Job's simple. You sit here from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights a week. Check people in, answer calls, keep an eye on things. Most nights, nothing happens. We don't get much traffic. You'll be alone most of the time. He said that last part with a kind of relish, like it was a perk. I asked about pay. $16 an hour, cash. Coffee's free. Microwave dinners in the back if you need them. There's a cot if you feel like napping. It wasn't glamorous, but it was better than what I had. "When can you start?" he asked. I hesitated. "When do you need me?" He grinned. "Tonight." That first night, I showed up early. My studio apartment in town had no AC, and the office at least had a fan buzzing in the corner. Only 2 rooms were occupied, room 7 and room 9. Cash guests, names scrawled in the logbook with no IDs attached. That struck me as odd. Every motel I'd ever stayed at asked for ID, but maybe this was just how small towns worked. I made coffee, even though I don't drink it at night, and flipped through one of the paperbacks someone had left behind. The cameras showed the parking lot, the hall outside rooms 1 through 5, and a shot of the fence line out back. No feed for rooms 6 through 10. I didn't question it then. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard the office door click open. My head jerked up. No one stepped inside. The door hadn't even swung fully. It just nudged like someone tested it. I stood, heart thudding, and peeked out. The lot was empty, silent, except for the bugs screaming in the trees. I shut the door, locked it. A few minutes later, the hallway camera glitched, a streak of static across the screen. When it cleared, room 3's door was cracked open, but I checked the log. Room 3 was empty, had been for weeks. I leaned forward, staring. Slowly, the door creaked wider, revealing just darkness inside. The phone rang. I nearly dropped the receiver in my scramble to grab it. "Redwood Motel, this is Rachel." Heavy breathing, then a low, raspy male voice. "You shouldn't be here." Click. Line dead. I sat there frozen, staring at the monitor. Room 3's door was closed again. The next evening, before my shift, Harlan showed up. He leaned against the doorframe, smiling that same stretched-out smile. "Any trouble last night?" he asked. I swallowed. "Just..." The door to room 3 opened on its own. "You might want to check the lock." His smile didn't move. "That room's sealed shut. Hasn't been used in years." But I saw, "Don't worry about room 3. He cut me off. His eyes sharpened for just a second. "Just stick to the office, Rachel. Everything will be fine." The second night, the footsteps started. Around 3 a.m., gravel crunched just outside the office window. I whipped around. Nothing. But on the backlot camera, a tall, thin man appeared, dragging something behind him. The image was distorted, jerky. Then the feed cut. When it flickered back on, the lot was empty. I rushed to the closet to check the keys. The key for room 3 was gone. I never heard anyone come in. By morning, I was too wired to sleep. The fourth night was the one that broke me. At 1:17 a.m., someone knocked on the office door. Slow, deliberate. 5 knocks. I looked out the window. A man stood there. Pale, sunken eyes, his collar was stained with blood. I stumbled back, grabbed the phone, dialed 911. The call wouldn't connect. I looked again. The man was gone. But on the hallway feed, he was there. Standing outside room 3, the door wide open, he stepped inside. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't even grab my bag. I jumped into my car and drove. The next day, I was at my parents' house shaking. The police went to check the motel. They found my backpack and wallet stuffed in a garbage bin out back. Harlan told them I'd quit without notice, that I wasn't cut out for night work. Room 3, they found it bolted shut from the inside. No one inside, and all the camera footage after midnight was wiped clean. I never got paid. I didn't care. 3 months later, the Redwood Motel shut down. Rumors flew about squatters, a missing traveler, a foul stench leaking from room 3. I never went back, and I never worked another night shift again. Story 4. I never thought I'd end up working nights at a roadside motel in the middle of nowhere, but life has a way of cornering you. My name is Daniel Reyes. I was 26 when this happened, and I can still remember every detail like it was carved into my bones. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, the oldest of 3 boys. My parents came from Mexico in the late 70s with nothing but 2 suitcases and the kind of stubborn faith only poor immigrants carry. Dad worked construction, Mom cleaned houses, and I was the first in my family to graduate high school. College was supposed to happen, but money ran out. I spent a couple years bouncing between warehouse jobs, Then I followed a girlfriend to Virginia, thinking maybe I'd build a different kind of life. That fell apart fast. She left, I stayed, and by 1998 I was broke, living out of a studio with a mattress on the floor and desperate for steady work. That's how I found myself at the Silver Rest Inn, a low-slung L-shaped building on the edge of Millhaven, Virginia. Millhaven wasn't even a real town, just a cluster of boarded-up shops, a liquor store, and a diner that smelled like burnt coffee. The motel sat right off Route 12, the kind of road truckers use to cut across the state. The Silver Rest had 18 rooms, all ground level, with peeling turquoise doors and curtains that never fully closed. A flickering neon sign buzzed over the office window. Half the letters burned out, so it just read, Silv Rest. Nights were slow. Sometimes we wouldn't get a single check-in past midnight. The owner, a Korean woman named Mrs. Park, handled the day shifts. I covered nights, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was boring work, but I figured boredom was better than hunger. The only other regular was Frank Dwyer, the handyman. Big guy, mid-50s, smelled like motor oil and Old Spice. He'd stop by most nights to bum a cigarette and talk about the Redskins. He liked me well enough, said I had quiet eyes like someone who saw more than he said. I didn't know what to make of that. For the first few months, the nights blurred together. A drunk salesman here, a cheating couple there, the occasional trucker who wanted a room and a cup of stale coffee. Nothing unusual until November. That was when he showed up. It was just after 9:30 on a Thursday. I was behind the desk, half listening to an AM station, when I saw headlights sweep across the parking lot. A black sedan rolled in, not new but polished to a shine that made it look out of place among the rusted Chevys and dusty pickups. The engine cut off, and for a long moment, nobody got out. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped into the glow of the neon. Tall, lean, dressed in a charcoal overcoat and gloves, even though it wasn't that cold. A fedora shadowed his face, but when he looked toward the office, I swear his eyes caught the light in a way that made me freeze. Not bright, more like reflective, the way an animal's eyes look in headlights. He walked in slowly, like he had all the time in the world. "Evening," I said, voice catching a little. He didn't answer right away, just set a credit card on the counter with gloved fingers. The name read, Elias Mercer. "One night," he said finally. His voice was soft, low, like he was reading from a script. I handed him the form. "Need an ID with that, sir?" He tilted his head slightly. "Not tonight." Before I could press, he slid the card closer. Something about the way he said it, calm, certain, made me let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth losing my job over. I rang him into room 6, handed him the key, and he walked out without another word. No luggage, no bags, nothing. Just that coat, those gloves, and the silence that followed him down the row of rooms. The first night, nothing happened. He kept to himself. But the next evening, as I was restocking the coffee pot, Frank stopped by the office. "You got a new guest last night?" he asked. "Yeah, room 6. Frank frowned. "Man came out around 3 this morning. Just stood by the soda machine for 10 minutes. Didn't buy nothing. Didn't even move. Like he was waiting on someone. I shrugged it off, but the image stuck. By day 3, Mercer hadn't asked for towels, hadn't let housekeeping in, hadn't spoken to me beyond a nod. But every night the light under his door stayed on until dawn. And once, just once, I walked past and heard something. Not TV, not music. A low murmur like dozens of voices whispering at once. When I mentioned it to Frank, he spit into the dirt. "Some folks carry darkness with them," he said. "Best not to open the door." It went on for nearly a month. Mercer never checked out, never left during the day. Only at night, always after midnight, he'd step outside, sometimes to stand under the buzzing neon, sometimes to walk to the edge of the lot and face the woods, always silent, always alone, until the night he vanished. It was December 4th, cold enough that frost silvered the windshields. Around 2 a.m., I noticed the light in room 6 was off, first time since he'd arrived. By morning, the key was on the counter. No note, no payment beyond the first swipe of that card. Mrs. Park asked me to clean the room. I almost said no. Something in me recoiled at the thought, but she was the boss, so I went. The moment I opened the door, the smell hit me. Rot, metallic, wrong. The air was freezing like someone had left a window open in January, but everything was shut tight. The sheets were gone. The mattress was bare, stained dark in the middle. The chair was overturned, the lamp shattered. But it was the bathroom that broke me. The mirror was smeared with something thick, dark, almost brown in the weak light. Not paint, not dirt. I didn't need a test to know it was blood. Scrawled across the glass were 4 words, jagged, uneven. I am not alone. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. That's when I saw the sink. The drain was stuffed with something black and sodden. A glove. Leather. Bloated with liquid. I ran outside, gasping. Frank came running when he heard me, and when he saw the bathroom, his face went gray. "Call the sheriff," he said. The police came, then the county investigators. They taped off the room, asked questions I couldn't answer. The card was stolen. The name Elias Mercer led nowhere. The sedan was gone. 2 weeks later, a hunter found a body in the woods half a mile away. A young woman. She'd been missing for over a month. Her hair was gone, her wrist bound. The glove in the sink matched another found near the shallow grave. But the man, Mercer, or whatever his name really was never found. No prints, no record. Like he'd stepped out of nothing and returned to it. I quit the next morning, packed my clothes, left Millhaven, never looked back. But even now, years later, some nights I wake in the dark with the taste of metal in my mouth. I'll catch a flicker of movement by the window, hear that low murmur just out of reach, and in my dreams, the mirror waits. I am not alone. Sometimes I wonder if it was a warning or a promise. Either way, I carry it with me. Story 5. I used to think starting over meant putting enough miles between yourself and your past until the ache dulled into background noise. But miles don't fix much. They just give you longer stretches of road to replay everything you lost. My name's Daniel Mercer. Back then, I was 27, and if I'm being honest, I was hollowed out. The kind of hollow where people look at you and think you're fine, but you know damn well you're just surviving. 6 months earlier, my engagement ended. No, imploded. My fiancée, Emily, decided she was tired of waiting for me to grow up. That's the line that stuck. We'd been together since college, planned a wedding that never happened, saved for a future that didn't exist anymore. After she left, I floated, quit my warehouse job in Cleveland, sold half my furniture, packed the rest into a dented Chevy Malibu, and drove north with no destination except not here. That's how I ended up in Clearwater Falls, Michigan, a town so small you could drive through it in 4 minutes without tapping the brakes. The kind of place with one diner, one gas station, and one stoplight that blinked yellow after midnight. It wasn't home, but it wasn't Cleveland either. That was enough. Money ran out faster than I expected. After 2 weeks in a month-to-month rental, I needed work, anything steady. That's when I saw the handwritten sign taped to the diner's corkboard. Night clerk needed. Hollow Pines Motel. Apply in person. Cash. Quiet work. I laughed under my breath when I read it. Quiet work sounded perfect. I didn't want coworkers asking me about my life. Didn't want anyone asking me about Emily. I just wanted silence. The Hollow Pines Motel sat 2 miles out of town, just past where the highway bent into forest. 12 rooms, all single-story, shaped like an L. Paint-peeling neon sign that only flickered low pines when lit. The office door was propped open when I pulled up. Inside, behind a chipped counter, sat the owner. George Harlan, late 60s, wiry frame, heavy smoker's voice. "You hear about the night shift?" he asked, barely glancing at me. "Yeah," I said. "Name?" "Daniel Mercer." He eyed me like he was sizing up a stray dog, deciding if it would bite. Then he tossed a heavy key ring across the counter. "You breathe quiet?" he asked. I frowned. "I think so." "Good. This place don't need more noise. Midnight to 8. Lock the door. Don't let drunks in. If something don't look right, it ain't. Stay out of it. That's the job? That's the job." He tapped the counter. "Cash every Friday." That was it. No application. No ID check. I figured either he was desperate or he just didn't care. Probably both. The office was smaller than my old bedroom. Counter, squeaky ceiling fan, dusty coffee maker. A cot was jammed into a back nook where George said I could sleep, if things stayed calm. Most nights were dead quiet. A couple truckers, a salesman, sometimes a family that looked like they'd taken the wrong exit and regretted it. I'd sit for hours half watching muted TV or flipping through old magazines. The moths tapping at the glass were often the loudest thing I heard. By the fourth night, I started recognizing regulars. Walt, a trucker who always asked for room 2, left a $10 bill folded like a triangle on the counter. Janet, a woman in her 40s, checked in every Friday and left Sunday before dawn. She never made eye contact, always smelled faintly of whiskey. And then, room 7. George had told me flat out, don't rent out 7, plumbing's busted. But there was no key for room 7 on the ring. At first, I didn't think much of it. Motels are old. Stuff breaks. That changed on my 7th night. It was August 19th, around 2:20 a.m. A storm was building, wind pressing against the glass. Only 2 rooms were occupied, Walt in room 2 and some young couple in room 9. I heard a knock, not at the office. At room 7, 3 slow thuds. I stood up, craning my neck to see through the office window. The lot was empty, rain spitting now. Then, 4 more knocks, harder this time. My chest tightened. Against my better judgment, I stepped out into the rain, shirt sticking to my skin. Room 7's door was shut. Nobody stood outside it. But as I stared, the curtain twitched. Just a fraction, like someone had been watching and let go. By the time I got back to the office, the muted TV had switched off. On the counter lay a single key, old, tarnished silver, 7 etched into the top. I didn't touch it. Not that night. 3 nights later, just past 3 a.m., headlights swept across the lot. An old black Lincoln Continental, one headlight busted, engine rumbling too loud for the quiet woods. A tall man stepped out, lean build, dark jacket, hood up despite the warm air. He didn't come to the office. He walked straight to room 7. I froze, breath shallow. The man pulled something from his pocket. Metal glinted. He unlocked the door. By the time I stepped outside, the door was already shut. I wanted to knock. My legs wouldn't move. Instead, I walked the row of rooms, pretending to check locks. Walt's blinds were drawn. Room 9, the couple, was empty. They'd left without me noticing. Back in the office, I sat upright until the sun broke. I didn't sleep. The next evening, George showed up earlier than usual. He saw me clutching the silver room 7 key, rolling it between my fingers without realizing. "Where'd you get that?" His voice was sharp, different. "On the counter," I said quickly. "I thought maybe you didn't go in, did you?" "No." He leaned close, voice low. "If you ever see anyone in or out of 7, you call me. Don't matter what time. Don't matter who. You understand?" "Why?" I asked. He just shook his head. "You don't want to know." My final shift was August 24th. I remember because I packed a thermos of coffee like it might protect me. At 2:55 a.m., the Lincoln rolled in again. Same missing headlight, same man. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another man climbed out of the back seat, mid-20s, thin, face swollen with bruises. His hands shook as he followed the hooded man to room 7. He hesitated at the door. The taller man shoved him inside. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sit still. Minutes passed. 10, 15. Then came the sound. Muffled, broken screaming, like someone begging with their last breath. I grabbed the phone, called George. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. So I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out. Rain slicked the pavement, reflecting my beam as I crossed the lot. I pressed my ear to room 7's door. Silence. Then, thud. Another. Then nothing. My hand shook on the knob. It turned easily. Inside, darkness, thick with the smell of mold and copper. My light quivered over the bed, sheets stained dark, sticky, and in the corner, the younger man slumped against the wall, eyes glassy, chest still, dead. My throat closed. Behind me, footsteps. I spun. The hooded man stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just smiled. Something primal in me broke loose. I lunged, slamming my shoulder into him. He staggered, hit the wall. I bolted. I don't remember unlocking my car. Just tires screeching, gravel flying, the rain blurring everything. I drove until the highway opened, until I found a gas station glowing in the distance. I sat there until sunrise, shaking. Then I called the police. Cops found the body in room 7, and another buried behind the motel. George was arrested 2 days later. Turns out he'd been investigated years before. Illegal rentals, missing travelers, whispers of trafficking, but nothing ever stuck. Until now. The man from the Lincoln was arrested too. Neither of them spoke a word during trial. The Hollow Pines Motel was condemned, boarded up, and eventually torn down. It's been years, but I still dream of that night. The screams, the smile in the doorway, the weight of that tarnished key. I don't work nights anymore, and I don't stop in small towns when I'm driving through. Some places are built to be forgotten, others are built to hide things. The Hollow Pines Motel was both. Story 6, I hadn't meant to drive this late. The truth is, I hadn't meant to be driving at all that night. 2 days earlier, I'd been in Columbus, sitting at my kitchen table with a cardboard box of my belongings from work, a couple of design drafts, my coffee mug with a chipped rim, and a framed photo of my team from last year's Christmas party. I'd been a project assistant at a mid-sized construction company for 4 years. The kind of job that didn't pay much but felt stable until the layoffs came. It wasn't even the job loss that broke me the most. It was how quickly everything else unraveled after. My girlfriend Kelly said she couldn't keep carrying both of us and left. My landlord told me rent was going up another $200 starting September. And my mom, who'd always been my fallback when things got bad, was halfway across the country in Oregon, sick herself and unable to help. So when my old college friend Eric called and said his family's cabin in West Virginia was empty if I needed space, I jumped. I packed up, told myself it'd just be a long weekend to clear my head, and hit the road. The cabin was supposed to be quiet, healing, a place to reset. But quiet does strange things when you're already on edge. The first night, the silence pressed in on me so heavily I thought I'd suffocate. Every creak of the wood felt amplified. Every gust of wind outside sounded like footsteps circling the porch. I told myself it was nerves, nothing more. Still, I didn't sleep. By the second night, I couldn't take it. My chest felt tight, my skin prickled every time I turned off the light. So I packed my bag, tossed it in the trunk of my beat-up Ford Focus, and left just after sunset. I figured I'd drive through the night, maybe stop halfway, maybe not. I didn't care. I just needed to be moving. For the first hour, the drive was almost peaceful. The 2-lane highway wound through low hills, the sky a bruised mix of purple and orange, fields stretched out endlessly, punctuated only by the occasional farmhouse or rusting tractor. But as darkness settled, that peace soured into something else. Out here, away from the cities, night doesn't have streetlights or glowing billboards to soften it. It's just black. Black so heavy it swallows the edges of the road. Black that makes you question how far your headlights really reach. By 11:15, I was fighting to keep my eyes open. My phone had lost service miles back. The radio was nothing but static, and I hadn't passed another car in at least half an hour. I told myself I'd stop at the first place I saw, no matter what it looked like. That's when I spotted it. A light in the fog, barely visible at first. Then a sign, half the bulbs burned out, the other half buzzing faintly. Maple Rest Motel, vacancies. I slowed, squinting. The place looked ancient. A long, low row of rooms with stone walls and peeling paint, tucked behind a sagging wooden fence. A neon office sign flickered in the window. There were no cars in the lot, no sign of life at all. I almost kept driving, but my arms ached, my head felt heavy, and the thought of drifting off behind the wheel terrified me more than a shabby motel. So I turned in. Gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up. I sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel, debating. My gut told me to leave, but exhaustion won. The office door was an old wooden one with flaking white paint. I pushed it open and was met with a faint, musty smell, like damp carpet and something sweet gone sour. Inside, the light was dim, just a single bulb dangling overhead. Behind the counter sat an old man. He was thin, almost fragile looking, with white hair combed neatly back and watery blue eyes that seemed just slightly off, like he was looking through me instead of at me. "Evening," I said, forcing a smile. He nodded slowly. "Need a room?" "Yeah, just one night. Passing through." He didn't ask for ID, didn't ask how I'd pay. He simply slid a tarnished brass key across the counter. "Room 6, end of the row." I hesitated, waiting for him to say more, but he didn't. His gaze just drifted past me, unfocused. "Thanks," I muttered, pocketing the key. The hallway was narrow and too dark for how many bulbs lined the ceiling. The wallpaper was faded, patterned with gold vines that had dulled to brown. I passed doors marked 1 through 5, all closed, all silent. My footsteps echoed on the warped floorboards. Room 6's door stuck before it gave way with a low groan. The smell hit me first, stale air, dust, and something faintly metallic. The room wasn't dirty exactly, just old, forgotten. There was a single bed with a faded quilt, a small dresser with a cracked mirror, and a nightstand with a lamp that flickered when I turned it on. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking under me, and tried to shake the unease crawling up my spine. "It's just one night," I whispered to myself. "Just sleep and leave in the morning." But I couldn't relax. The air felt heavy, charged, like a storm was about to break. At around 12:45, just as my body finally began to give in, I heard it, a sound like fabric dragging across the floor. I froze, heart hammering. Slowly I sat up, eyes scanning the dim room. At first I thought it was nothing, just my imagination. Then I saw it, in the corner by the dresser. At first it looked like a shadow, but too solid, too dark. Someone or something was crouched there, facing the wall. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly the figure began to turn. Not standing, not crawling, just twisting. Its upper body rotated toward me with an unnatural smoothness, like a doll being wound on invisible strings. And where its face should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth, pale skin, featureless like wet clay. I choked back a sound, my throat tightening. The figure tilted its head as if listening, and then began to move toward me. Not walking, not crawling, just gliding a few inches above the floor. That broke me. I leapt off the bed, grabbed my bag, and bolted for the door. My hands shook so violently I fumbled with the knob. When it finally gave, I tore into the hallway, sprinting past the silent rooms, past the office, out into the cold night. I didn't look back. I threw myself into my car, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Gravel sprayed behind me as I sped out of the lot. I drove for nearly 2 hours before I dared stop. Finally, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station on the edge of Charleston, parked under the bright fluorescent lights, and sat there shaking. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I was exhausted, that it was a trick of shadows and nerves. But deep down, I knew better. I hadn't imagined the weight of that silence. I hadn't imagined the way the air thickened in that room, or how that thing turned toward me. And I'll never forget its face, or the absence of one. I haven't stayed in a roadside motel since, not because I'm afraid of seeing it again, but because I'm afraid I won't, that somewhere out there, it's still waiting. Story 7. I wasn't planning on stopping that night. Truth is, I hadn't been sleeping much for weeks. My brain felt like a furnace, always lit, always burning, never cooling down. Deadlines stacked on top of bills, stacked on top of phone calls I didn't want to return. That kind of exhaustion doesn't just wear you down, it hollows you out. My name is Eric Latham. Back then, I was 28 and working as a traveling IT contractor, which is a fancy way of saying I drove around fixing other people's network problems. Routers, switches, small server racks. If it broke, I was the guy they sent. The pay wasn't great, but the constant road work kept me away from the mess of my personal life. That week, I had an appointment in Coldwater Bay, Virginia, a coastal town I'd never been to. about 6 hours south of where I lived in central New Jersey. The job was scheduled for Tuesday morning. My plan was simple: leave Monday night, sleep somewhere cheap on the road, and arrive fresh at the site. I didn't want to leave at dawn and risk hitting commuter traffic all the way down the Maple 95 corridor. So around 7 p.m., I tossed a change of clothes and my laptop into my beat-up duffel bag, locked my apartment, and got in the car. I remember telling myself, don't overthink it, Eric. Just drive, crash somewhere decent, and keep moving. I'd done this 100 times. Motels, roadside inns, Airbnb cabins that looked like they hadn't been lived in for years. You stop caring about reviews after a while. You just learn to trust your gut. But that night, my gut was screaming at me, and I ignored it. About 2 hours into the drive, somewhere outside Ashford, Maryland, I pulled into a gas station to grab coffee. While the car filled, I scrolled through a booking app. There it was: Ashford Motel, budget stay, $49 a night. The pictures showed a flat single-story strip of rooms with peeling paint but working lights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a bed. I hesitated. The reviews were weird. Some just said, "Okay, stay." Others were written in broken English, short and vague. "Good night." Quiet. Yes, a few had no text at all, just stars. I called the number listed. A man answered after 4 rings. "Yeah?" His voice was hoarse, like he'd just woken up. Hi. I was wondering if you had any rooms available tonight. Cash or card?" "Card." "Yeah, we got one. Room 12. Come by. Do I need to check in at the desk, or?" He cut me off. "Just knock. Someone will give you the key." The line went dead. I should have hung it up right there, but my eyelids were already heavy, and the thought of another 3 hours on the road made my stomach turn. So I drove. It was close to 11:30 p.m. when I pulled off the highway. The GPS led me down a narrow, cracked road lined with dead cornfields and half-collapsed barns. The motel sat alone at the end, lit by a single buzzing neon sign that flickered: Ashford Motel. Vacancy. The parking lot was nearly empty. 2 cars sat rusting near the far corner, both missing plates. I pulled into a spot near the middle. My headlights fell across the row of doors. Room 12 was dead center, with a crooked plastic 12 nailed above it. The curtains were drawn tight. No light inside. I killed the engine. The silence was thick. No crickets, no wind, just the soft buzz of the neon. Grabbing my duffel, I walked to the door. Knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. After a pause, the door creaked open just a few inches. A pale hand pushed a brass key through the gap. No eye contact, no words. Just the hand and the key. Thanks," I muttered, taking it. The hand vanished. The door shut. I stood there a moment, unsettled, before unlocking the room. The smell hit first: old cigarettes and mildew. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. The carpet was threadbare, stained in patches. A small table sat against the wall with one chair tucked neatly beneath it. The bedspread was faded, patterned with flowers that had long since lost their color. But what caught me was the TV. An old, boxy set sat on the dresser. No cables, no remote, just dark and facing the bed like a silent witness. I tried to shake it off. "It's fine, Eric. It's just one night. Crash, wake up, move on." I dropped my bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone had no signal, not even a bar. "Great," I muttered. Around midnight, I tried to sleep. I left the lamp on. I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. The dark in that room felt too heavy, like it pressed down on me. But I couldn't drift off. Every creak of the walls made me twitch. My thoughts kept circling. That hand, that silence, those empty reviews. I sat up and whispered to myself, "It's fine. You're tired. That's it." Eventually, I got up to use the bathroom. The tiles were cracked, yellowed with age. A single bar of soap melted into the dish like it had been sitting there untouched for years. I sat on the toilet, staring at the peeling paint, when I heard it. Screech. A chair leg dragging slowly across the floor. I froze. It came from the main room. That unmistakable sound, wood grinding against carpet. I leaned forward, holding my breath. Screech. Then, tap. Tap, tap, fingers, tapping rhythmically on wood. My stomach flipped. The only chair in that room was the one I'd left tucked under the table. The tapping grew faster. Tap, 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 tap. Then silence. Dead silence. I whispered, "What the hell?" Slowly, I pulled my jeans back on, heart pounding in my ears. If someone was out there, they already knew I was here. I stepped out of the bathroom, eyes darting across the room. The chair was back under the table, perfectly tucked in. No one there. I grabbed my duffel, my laptop, my knife from the side pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the key. I didn't check the bed, didn't check the corners. I just yanked the door open, bolted to my car, and sped off into the night like the building itself was alive. I didn't stop until nearly 3 a.m. when I found a chain hotel in Cumberland. The desk clerk gave me a funny look when I walked in, pale and sweating. "You good, man?" he asked. "I just need a room." Any room. He gave me a key without more questions. I didn't sleep. I sat in bed staring at the blank TV on the dresser, hearing that screech in my head over and over. The next morning, I checked my GoPro footage. I had left it running in the room. Habit after someone once stole my things in Virginia. The recording showed the room exactly as I'd left it. Still, silent. Nothing moved. But when the timestamp hit 12:41 a.m., the moment I'd heard the chair, the screen went black. Not static, not corrupted, just pure black. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Then it came back, perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. I never went back to Ashford. Never stayed in another motel without a front desk either. But sometimes on long drives, when exhaustion sets in, I think about that hand through the door, the chair, the tapping, and I wonder if that room is still waiting for me. Story 8. I never thought I'd end up working nights at a roadside motel in a town most maps barely bothered to label. But if I've learned anything about life, it's that it doesn't care much for what you thought. My name's Daniel Mercer, and back in 2021, I was 28 and carrying the weight of too many wrong turns. I grew up in Ohio, just outside Dayton. My dad was a machinist until the factory shut down, and my mom worked nights at a care home. I was supposed to be the first in my family to finish college, and for a while it looked like I might. I studied journalism at Kent State, wrote for the student paper, even won a little award my sophomore year. But then came the spiral. It started small, missed classes, assignments half done. Then came nights I can't even fully remember, parties that bled into days, people who pulled me down because I wanted so badly not to be alone. By my second year, I was failing more than passing. One cold January morning, I walked out of my dorm with a duffel bag and never went back. The years after were patchwork, warehouse jobs, bar shifts, some construction work when I could find it. None of it stuck. I kept telling myself I'd get back on track, but the track had vanished. In 2021, after a breakup that left me with little more than a stack of books in a secondhand car, I ended up in Riverside, Kentucky, a town off US 65 that most people just drove past without noticing. That's where I found the Moorfield Motel. The place was as plain as they come. 2 stories, paint peeling in strips, neon sign out front that only worked half the time, 10 rooms total, 6 on the top floor, 4 tucked around the back near the alley. No pool, no continental breakfast, not even a working ice machine. But the owner, Mr. Patel, needed someone to cover nights, and I needed rent money. He paid me $11.75 an hour, cash if I asked, and gave me a tiny discount on one of the units for myself until I found somewhere else. I told myself it was temporary. Most nights were so quiet it felt like the world had forgotten the place existed. I'd sit behind the front desk, chipped oak with scratches, so deep you could catch your fingernail in them, and read paperbacks I picked up from thrift shops. The lobby always smelled faintly of mildew, old carpet shampoo, and the lemon cleaner the morning staff used with too much enthusiasm. The vending machine in the corner gave a low groan every few minutes like it was sighing at the futility of being there at all. The guests were the usual mix: truckers grabbing 4 hours of sleep, tired families who couldn't push on to Louisville, couples who didn't want questions. I stayed out of the way and let time crawl. But one night, late November, cold and wet in that bone-deep Kentucky way, everything changed. It began quietly, like every other shift. Rain had been falling since afternoon, slicking the parking lot into a mirror of orange lamplight. I made myself a weak cup of instant coffee and opened a dog-eared detective novel. The desk lamp threw a small cone of yellow onto the pages. I was halfway through when the entrance bell gave its dry little jingle. I looked up. The man who walked in wasn't wet. That was the first thing that stuck with me. It was coming down hard outside, but his long gray coat was bone dry. His boots, though, were caked in mud, thick clumps that broke off and left brown stains across the tiles as he stepped closer. "Evening," I offered. He didn't answer, just stared. His hair was matted, streaked with gray. There was a twitch just beneath his left eye, a nervous little spasm that didn't seem like something he controlled. Shadows carved deep under his eyes, the kind that don't come from missing just one night of sleep. "You need a room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. A pause, then finally he muttered, "Cash." He pulled a folded wad of bills from his coat. Room 5 was free. I slid the key across. "Name?" I asked, nodding at the register. His hand shook as he wrote, "Michael Grady." The letters scrawled and uneven, his signature almost unreadable. I watched him shuffle down the hall, moving like someone not used to being indoors. My first thought was maybe he was homeless or just drifting. None of my business. People carried stories, and I'd stopped asking for them. The next hour was slow. I refilled the hand soap in the lobby restroom, stacked some clean glasses, then sat back down with my book. The rain outside beat steady against the windows. Sometime around midnight, I dozed, my head bobbing as the faint static from the little radio on the counter lulled me. Then came the noise, a heavy thud, sharp enough to jolt me awake. Then the sound of wood scraping, like a drawer being wrenched open and slammed shut again. I sat upright, heart hammering. Another thud, then a dragging sound, like something heavy pulled across the floor. Room 5. I stood, hesitant, and made my way down the hall. The old carpet muted my steps. Outside the door, I pressed my ear against it. Silence, I knocked lightly. "Sir, everything all right in there?" Nothing. I waited another 10 seconds before turning back. People did strange things in motels. Not my problem. I had just sat back at the desk when a violent bang echoed down the corridor. My heart jumped. Then the door to room 5 burst open. Michael stood there, eyes wild, lips pulled back in something between a snarl and a scream. He stared at me like I wasn't real, like I was a hallucination in some fever dream. Then, without a word, he bolted down the hall and shoved open the door to room 7. Empty, hadn't been rented in days. "Sir, you can't." I started, but he was already inside, tearing at the bedding like a man possessed. Sheets flew, pillows hit the wall. The mattress was dragged half off the frame. He muttered words I couldn't piece together, sharp syllables, fragments of sentences that sounded more like pleading than anger. I froze in the doorway. "Whatever you're looking for, it's not here." My voice shook despite trying to steady it. He didn't even look up. That's when I realized my phone was still at the front desk. I turned to go fetch it, but stopped dead. Someone else was standing in the hallway. "Danny?" It was Mark Evans, the night security guard for the strip mall. 2 buildings down. Big guy, built like a linebacker but calm as still water. He stopped in most nights for coffee or just to shoot the breeze. "What the hell's going on?" he asked, stepping up beside me. "I think he's on something." Or not right, I whispered. Mark took in the scene. "All right, I got this. Go call the cops." "Wait." But he was already moving into the room, hands up, voice low and steady. "Hey, buddy. Easy now. No one's here to hurt you. Just take a breath." Michael spun, eyes blazing, and lunged. The sound of their collision was sickening. Fists slamming drywall, the lamp crashing to the floor, the bed frame groaning as they crashed into it. "Call the cops," Mark barked, straining to hold him down. I bolted for the desk, grabbed the landline, and punched 911 with trembling hands. The dispatcher's voice was calm, too calm, as I stammered through the address and the mess unfolding down the hall. By the time the blue lights cut through the rain-soaked parking lot, Mark had Michael pinned, one arm twisted behind his back, blood on his lip but eyes steady. The officers swarmed in, voices sharp and practiced. Michael fought like a man twice his size, screaming, biting, thrashing, but they got the cuffs on him and dragged him out. I'll never forget his face as they shoved him into the cruiser. The rage was gone. In its place was something else, pleading. His eyes locked on mine through the rain-streaked glass. Not anger, not fear, just desperation. The rest blurred, statements, questions, guests complaining about the noise. The younger cop told me quietly that Michael had a record. Not usually violent, but erratic. He'd been committed once, a few years back. No family they knew of. They suspected meth, maybe schizophrenia, maybe both. When Ruth, the morning clerk, came in at 6, she didn't ask, just put a steaming mug of tea in front of me and took over. I walked home in the gray dawn, rain finally reduced to a mist that clung to everything like sweat. I didn't sleep that day, couldn't, because what haunted me wasn't the screaming or the fight. It was that moment in the cruiser when he turned toward me with eyes that seemed to beg for something I didn't have. And worse, the question I still can't shake, why room 7? I left the Moorfield Motel 5 months later, took a delivery job, moved apartments, swore off night shifts for good. But sometimes driving past old buildings or half-empty inns, I think of him, of the rain that night, of those pleading eyes, and I wonder what he was looking for, and if he ever found it, even just in his mind.